I would say that the parties do stand for relatively similar things in terms of like capitalism kind of thing, but I think people forget that when people get in government and that kind of thing, things take a long time. Again, it takes a long time to change them, and so when people become disenfranchised with parties, for example, it is also perhaps due to the fact that things take a long time to change and they can't do exactly what they want because it's not an ideal world. Things don't happen that quick.
Can I just add something? I'd like to say I think it's out of like the disenfranchisement that is one of the things that makes it hardest when people when you were saying, oh, you did this. I know you weren't referring to us personally, but I think if people could start thinking about the parties, I'm not trying to lecture, I mean literally everyone, if people could think about the parties in as philosophical way as possible, I think that's the best way to actually see what the parties stand for. Like, their core principles are actually quite different. It just turns out that all of them have a reasonably populist front to try and appeal to win elections, because otherwise you don't win elections and you don't get to enforce as close a system as your philosophy would allow. But I think that if more people were aware, maybe it should be made more accessible or whatever, to what the party's core defining principles are. From the three represented here and much more, I think that would be a lot better, and then people would probably get involved with the parties with those principles in mind, rather than headline flagship policies at the end of the day I think stand for very little. So I think that's a good way to go about it, to find out, I suppose, almost what your political philosophy is, and then
it's good to talk about the philosophy of parties and obviously what they mean individually, but unfortunately that people don't pick up papers or they don't pick up sound bites in news and pick up the in-detail philosophy of parties. People pick up actions and what people say, ideally. And if you're going to appeal to a vast range of people, some of who aren't politically literate, talking about philosophies and everything like that, that's not going to grab them. I understand what you mean, but that's not going to grab them in order to get people.
No, I understand that. I think there's a cause and effect there, and you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't, as someone in a political party, because if you go one way, you'll be criticised by a bunch of people that want you to say what you actually stand for.
Then that's politics, that's life, isn't it?
And then if you go the other way, you'll be criticised by the people who say, oh, there's no sound bites of what your actual policies, and you're right, that is life. But I think that people generally are very, very hard on politicians, and politics are all the same. Oh, they're all blah, 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 this, that and the other. But actually a lot of them are all stuck in the middle. And I think there's a huge lack of empathy of politicians to make mistakes that all of us make in life, and to try and work through the dilemmas that all of us have in life. And I think in terms of talking about political maturity, that's something to try and be aware of.
You can keep going.
No, it's fine.
Okay. Unless anybody else has any comments to make on that point.
Can I just ask you to expand, if it's not too specific, on the recycling problem? Because I think it represents quite a general criticism of the Green parties that they're too blind optimistic.
Well, it's a fair criticism. Obviously, we are optimistic, very much so. The specific issue with the recycling and the wider problem with the bin collection in Brighton, as far as I can see, and being someone who's lived here for 4 months, is that the Green the Green body on the council wanted to raise council tax to afford proper bin collection to sort out an existing problem. Now this was blocked by the Labour and Conservative councils, from what I understand. So the issue is not so much about blind optimism. It's not about it's just the way things are. It's about an active attempt on the part of the existing system to discredit any alternative to it.
You look at East Sussex County Council, which is unfortunately a Tory-run council, and it's got one of the it's got some of the poorest areas in it as well. If you have like Hastings, and it froze its council tax because the government were funding. I can't remember what they were doing, but they were doing something like this. So it'd be equivalent to a 2%, was it a 1% rise? The thing where the government said if you freeze council tax, we'll give you money so it's equal to a rise. And every bin collection and recycling in East Sussex is going absolutely fine. Yes, obviously there have been difficult decisions thanks to the Tories and the Lib Dems, but I just would have thought the environment would have been top of priority. And I don't buy that it's Labour's fault when we were in council in Brighton and we had one of the best recycling rates in the country, and the roadworks are appalling. I cycle in Brighton a lot, and I think sometimes I'd rather be cycling in the middle of Trafalgar Square. It's ridiculous. It's not green at all. I've never seen anything. Do you know, I actually really quite admire the Green, or did admire the Green Party. I really thought, do you know what, we've got a party which is going to pull the Labour Party back to its traditional roots. And thank God you have, because now, luckily, the Greens have got no chance of actually doing what they've done in Brighton, because the Labour Party said, we're going to take, you know, the issues that you once did lead on, and we're going to show how we're going to lead on it, because it's been appalling.
Can I ask you quickly where it is you cycle in Brighton? Because as a cyclist, Brighton is the best city I've ever cycled in Brighton.
Yeah,
No, have you ever cycled around 7 Dials?
Yeah.
It's absolutely...
It's really good.
No, it's not.
Genuinely is really good.
No, it's absolutely
I
not.
have a personal opinion. If we could move on to the next question, that'd be good. Which is the first past the post voting system here? Would anybody like to start off?
I don't really have much to say on this because as far as I can see, the Labour Party don't have any specific plans on this issue. But just to say that the AV vote in, was it 2011, the result of that was 67.9% no. So I think in any change of the electoral system, we always need to check with the public first. And on that instance, they said no. So we should uphold that. But there is obviously a lot of discussion to be had about that not being the right system to propose to the public. But I don't think that's really our fault.
Miliband supported AV.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is worth
The Labour Party had no specific stance on that. It's kind of vote for what you believe in.
And when people said that the result for AV meant that people wanted first past the post, I don't buy that at all. Voting no to AV was not voting yes to first past the post. I encourage my mother to vote no to AV because I'd like to see some form of proportional representation or the supplementary vote in Australia, not because I was pro first past the post. It's a ridiculous system, absolutely ridiculous. Get rid of it.
So do you not think 2 or 3 elections under AEV would have led to STV because they're both the similar systems that you count?
Yeah, but I just think there's, I suppose they're quite. I would prefer proportional representation.
That's what STV is.
But if I had to choose between AV and the supplementary vote, I'd rather it first and second.
Well, supplementary vote, not STV.
Oh, is that what?
Because AV would have led to STV.
One which is 1 and 2 for the London election.
Oh, that's supplementary vote.
That's supplementary. Yeah.
And then STV, single transferable vote, which is basically proportional representation. And AEV, the plan was for 2 or 3 elections under that, people get used to counting the 5 on the ballot paper, and then they'll transfer to STV after a few years. That was sort of that's why voting no to AEV. Voting no to
Someone's going to ask you this, so I'm not going to know.
But voting no to AEV actually meant that proportional representation is a long way off. And the Labour Party, they were the most vigorous campaigns against it. They're the ones who wrote the leaflet saying that it's either hospital beds or AV. Ed Miliband, no one listens.
Well, I think the point you made about taking the vote of AV to listen to the people first, I'm not sure that that's strictly true with something like voting, because something else that would instantly people associate with fairness is the justice system. If you took a poll of people on whether you think the death penalty should be reinstated, they'd overwhelmingly vote yes, which I think that's ridiculous. So I'm very glad that the people aren't listened to on that. And I think, frankly, on introducing a more proportional voting system, I think that would be a very good thing for government to do, with or without the public's consent, I suppose, just as a part of the political party's manifesto going in. I'm not sure it necessarily needs a referendum when people don't really know what they're talking about, and if they had it, they'd think, oh, actually, it's not hard to count 5 at all.
Green Party?
Yeah, cool. We're very much pro-proportional representation. We're very much anti-first past the post. It is a ridiculous system. We're moving to a system now where if they were all here, we'd have 5 main parties kind of competing for votes across the majority of the UK. And so there is a possibility of a party to win a seat on 25% of the vote or something like that. So what are the other 75% of people living in that constituency going to say? So yeah, it is absolutely time that we change the first past the post system. And you are right, there was the issue with the AV referendum. My personal feeling is that was a referendum on Nick Clegg. The way it came in, the way it was a compromise between what the Liberal Democrats wanted and what the Conservatives wanted, which was no change to the system because it suits them perfectly, thank you very much. And so, yeah, we need to change the first past the post system. We do need more proportional representation. The exact nature of what that system should be is for people cleverer than me to work out. And the question of whether the public should be consulted is an important one. I feel perhaps that people, when you say to someone what's the most important issue in your kind of, in the national interest, in the political sphere that you care about right now, they are unlikely to say electoral reform, purely because we haven't done enough as politicians, as the media, to explain to people what is the problem with the current system and how can we better
I think that's the
solve it.
problem with AV rather than Nick Clegg.
Well, and I think not so much that Nick Clegg's an awful person, but that people were voting on the AV.
I'm not sure they were. I think some probably were, but I think a lot of people just didn't know what AV was.
Also, turnout was very low for AV, like 35%. So.
Well, because actually proportional representation, people understand what that means. When you say AV, unless you watch those ridiculous videos where they use animals to represent... I mean, how patronising can you get to use, an elephant? Like, oh, if I vote for Mr. Elephant, for the first vote...
I would say that that's possibly we were naive in government at that point, and we, were quite patronising. In fact, you could say it was.
Oh no, it wasn't you. It was like
No, it wasn't. It was Electoral Reform, Electoral Reform Society.
But also the fact that we said, AV to get people used to proportional representation. Why don't we just go for proportional representation first?
Yeah.
They couldn't.
Because
But
And neither would Labour actually in the coalition agreement, even though it's in the Labour manifesto, they didn't want to do it.
oh right, well, there we go.
I didn't know that.
Quick thing, I think it's of the different voting systems we can choose, it's the most unfair, the worst possible choice, and we are kind of backward for still keeping this around. We should move into a different era, but while it's here, it benefits those in power, and I think that's the main thing that's keeping it in place. As far as this is something that I get the feeling that the Greens and the Lib Dems genuinely care about. It's somewhere relatively high on our agenda, and for the established parties, the Conservatives and Labour, it's a kind of philosophical discussion. Maybe we can, maybe we wouldn't. And somebody from each party might say, yes, I think we should, but attacks on it come from different levels. They speak to different people. So I remember when we had the referendum, I remember you saying that they compared the cost of having the referendum to hospital beds.
Yeah, that's Labour people right there.
Right, yeah. I remember reading stuff when the gloves came off in it, where it just posters coming through my letterbox saying one man, one vote is the only fair way. And as I walk around the market in town, this is what I'm hearing from people who don't engage that much with the process. Yeah.
Right, we have about 5 minutes left, so if we could possibly discuss any pressing questions that are remaining about anything that we've discussed so far. Does anybody in the audience have any questions or comments? No? Yes?
Yeah, something I think you said about people disenfranchised because of the general political structure they can't get into. Do you have confidence that the Green Party can change that?
I think so. I mean, obviously, there's the issue where, currently we have one MP, we're looking to get maybe 3 maximum at the next election, so obviously our stopping power in Parliament isn't going to be colossal. But it's something that we stand for, and it's something that in any kind of power sharing arrangement, or in terms of as so rightly puts it, kind of pulling the other parties more to sort of where we think they ought to be. That's something we are definitely committed to.
I think the Greens would be a great focus group within the Labour Party. But what I would say about this as well is that the established parties have got a bad reputation. But I think I'm standing for Parliament. I'm not the sort of person who stands for Parliament. I grew up in a deprived seaside town, walking to the train station to go to my local state comprehensive school every day, watching people take drugs in a town with the highest teenage pregnancy rate. But do you know what? I decided that I wanted to support the Labour Party's policies and get involved. And there are so many people standing for Parliament with me who have got the exact same backgrounds. We're not part of the establishment. We want to change the establishment, but we're doing it in a party that has actually not only made a difference to people's lives already with the minimum wage, saving our NHS by guaranteeing young people a job, but a party that's got a real clear vision about making society fair. And I would, as I said, absolutely welcome the Green Party to be a part of the Labour Party as an advisory group.
You know what, if you were the only voice standing for Labour... Sorry, he interrupted me.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Okay.
I'll be brief. The issue I think there pretty much is that people are disenfranchised with the Labour Party. Now, I can't personally change that about everyone, neither can you, unfortunately.
I'm trying.
Oh, no, totally. And that's absolutely something that needs to be done. People need to restore their faith in politics, whether that's faith in the Labour Party or faith in, in anyone, or whether that needs to come from somewhere else, for example, the Green Party. The issue is that there is a lot of shit to wipe off the fan. And, for example, talk about saving the NHS, the Labour government actually introduced privatisation to the NHS. Things like just little things that the first government privatised hospital that Labour introduced has just gone into administration. The fact is, there's a lot of stuff that has gone on in politics and stuff that needs to be sorted, and that's stuff that I think we need the established parties to do their bit, but we also need new and fresh voices, and that is where the Green Party comes in.
I've got a few things to say. I've got a big problem with you saying that you think the Green Party should be a focus group in the Labour Party.
Well, I didn't say it should be. I said I think it would be great if it was.
Yeah, I think that would be an absolute disaster. I think one of the best things that should happen in politics is that the party should get smaller, so you actually know what you're standing for, rather than some simple, oh, this is slightly left centre, this is slightly right centre. I think that's a nightmare. I think ideally the Labour Party should split into 2 or 3 pieces, maybe the Greens even. I think the ideal thing would be to literally have you be able to think, yeah, that's the party, this is why I'm in that party for that reason. Everyone in my party is like-minded, rather than you've essentially got a coalition of people disagreeing with each other in various political parties. I think that's awful. Secondly, you keep interrupting him, stop it. And thirdly, with the privatisation of Labour, Labour introduced more than just PFI initiatives. And I think 4 points, I think something like 4.6% of the NHS was privatised.
Have you really got the cheek to say that when the Lib Dems voted for the bloody Andrew Lansley bill and have supported what is absolutely disgusting? Well, I go to a physiotherapist and Virgin Care are providing it.
Once again, can you not interrupt me? Let me finish my points.
Then don't lie.
It's not a lie, it's true.
Right, okay, keep going. Yeah, okay. So, Labour actually introduced, I think, 2/3 of the outsourcing that we actually have in the NHS. The Hinchingbrook Hospital thing wasn't the problem with it being privatised, it was just that it was outsourced to the wrong bidder, which the government audit body was scaling of, that it got awarded to Circle rather than Serco. Basically, it was incompetence from the awarding party, which would, well, not party, the awarding, the people on the panel committee, thank you. But I think outsourcing in the NHS is one of the biggest red herrings that people kick off about. And you're just kicking off about it there. The King's Fund, who are perhaps the leading health NGO body of experts in this country, whilst they've criticised the Tories' health reforms for being basically useless, they haven't done anything, they've also said that the Labour and the Green Party constantly going on about privatisation is just a boy who cried wolf. The outsourcing that the NHS has seen is not privatisation. You do not have to, it's still free at point of use. It makes no sense to call it privatisation. It's marketisation, I suppose you could call it, which actually has only made it more efficient. There is nothing wrong with the outsourcing of the NHS. Health experts are clear. There's nothing wrong with it as it has happened so far. That's it.
Would you like a response to that?
Well, just very simply, 70 years ago in May, we created, less than 70 years ago, nearly 70 years, there was we created the NHS because we believed in the values that it stands for, and we will never, as the political party, do anything, I believe, to not have it at the best as it is, and it was at the best that it's ever been at under the Labour Party.
I agree with you, but that didn't include
anyone who would criticise it. See, it gets quite addictive, the interrupting thing, doesn't it? But I would also say that I know that we do have to rush off to Labour event, which anyone is welcome to. We have Jeremy Corbyn, Member of Parliament for Islington North, who's speaking about student housing upstairs in which room. I wanted to very rudely say that a little bit already really late.
Just round off your Okay, right. Well, that wraps it up.